All right, guys, we've got another match memories with your boy Rob Wilkins. What's up, Rob?
Sup, guys? How you doing?
So you wanted to look over, Flair Steamboat for the heavyweight title at Chi-Town Rumble '98. Um,
89.
well,
Mhm.
'89.
Yeah.
It's been a long morning and afternoon here. So what made you pick this, and what impact did it have in your life in general from after watching it, and also as a fan?
Well, what did it for me was I was about 80. It was in 89, so I was 7 years old. And it was like one of the first times that it was one of my earliest memories of uh, guys like Lex Luger, Barry Windham, uh, Road Warriors. I think it might have been one of the first times I ever saw Jim Cornette, and not saying that's a good thing anymore, but you know what I mean. But there's guys like Stan Lane, Bobby Eaton, Butch Reed. Um, Even that was the first time I ever saw Michael P.S. Hayes as well. Um, it was just overall like going back to it, looking at it now as how much history that event has for me. And that's not including one of the best matches that I ever saw in my childhood um, was Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat. I remember I was always a WWF kid, and
I think all of
um,
us were at one
oh
point.
yeah, but and it was to the point where NWA wasn't really um, on my TV much. And it wasn't just it just was kind of harder to find for me where I lived. Um, but it was one of those things when I watched it, I was just I loved it, and I think that helped get my interest in um, wrestling overall. Like I started watching different things, and I remember I was 10 years old when I watched my first New Japan show. Like I was able to get a VHS copy of an event at a video store in Texas of all places, and I watched it because I just love different wrestling, um and I just always go back to this as being one of the major points in pro wrestling for me.
So you went the Paul Heyman route, basically, just try to get your hands on everything that you can after seeing this, and then it's where you are right now.
Yeah, and what was so different about this show for me was it seemed like it was more geared towards um older people. Like um you didn't have the weird gimmicks, you didn't have and nothing was like I still loved that stuff, like the Big Boss Man and stuff, but these were just actual for the most part guys. Um for the most part. But um it just caught my eye, and down the road it got me into more things, and I went down eventually as I got older in my teenage years. I went down the ECW path, and then I started watching things like IWA, King of the Deathmatch, um, stuff like that, and then I just overall got into everything.
Yeah, and now you're one of the predominant members in a community, one of the pillars, in my opinion, which is a very good compliment, by the way.
I appreciate that, but I don't even like. Yeah, I appreciate that, but I don't even feel like I'm close to that. Um, but I do appreciate that. I try to keep things fun. At least I make some ridiculous I have ridiculous tweets, but usually I delete those after I realize how ridiculous they were.
A lot of times they're
Yeah,
funny.
and that's the point. We gotta laugh. This day and age, we um, there's a lot of things we need to do, and laughing's one of those. So I try to make people happy, and one of the great things about pro wrestling, it for the most part makes me it's good for me. So yeah.
We're recording this a week before what they're now calling Clash of Champions, or COC. I'm not gonna say it out loud. It's still gonna be Night of Champions to me. but these guys went really hard. I think the match was about 20 minutes.
Yeah, it was about 20 to 23 minutes, I believe, something in that time range.
It had an hour time limit. It was awesome seeing these guys so young. I was like, I was like almost 9, getting 9 at that point. Ross, Jim Ross in this sounding so young was really, it threw me off a little bit at times because it's like you're so used to plug into him being the Attitude Era and now AEW that it's kind of hard to hear that tone in that quality of audio compared to where it is now with audio with its mostly digital audio.
Yeah.
So Ross saying that the 2 times that the titles were defended, it's the second time that the titles were defended in Chicago. Like I said, it's fun to see these guys young. The start of the match was pretty good. The shoulder tackle and a pin attempt by Steamboat, and Steamboat again with another shoulder tackle. These guys went all out, hitting hard. It was extremely physical match.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, it was literally a chess match. Commentary says, Ross said. The part on this where Flair was trying to get control and Steamboat doing tie-ups, but Steamboat wouldn't let go of it in the corner was really good. But God, these chops are so vicious. In the early start of the match, what's your favorite part of the match?
Well, what goes back to me when I rewatched this, I rewatched it twice before I knew I was doing this because I wanted to go back and make sure I didn't miss anything. When the show started, when the main event started for that matter, it sounded like you said Jim Ross. It sounded so different compared to what we're used to, and for a split second, I was like, because it's been a while since I've watched some older WCW stuff or NWA for that matter. So I kind of was like, I thought Jim Ross called this, and so I kind of I stopped and I went to look it up, and I go, that was Jim Ross, and he like you said, sounds so different compared to now. And granted, this show was over 30 years ago, but
On top of that was before he had a stroke too.
yeah. But even when he went to WWF, he sounded different, at that early time. And him and Magnum TA were the commentators. Magnum was the color commentator. But I remember what specifically, watching this again, what I remember were how Ric Flair's famous theme song started playing. And you see these blue lights flashing, like they start flashing right before they announce them, and you knew the main event was starting because you could hear the crowd get up and go. But as the match started, I was pretty excited because Steamboat got the early momentum until Flair started getting coming back on him. Flair did his jumping knee spot or knee drop, and then they kind of did a couple things here and there, and nothing major. Just Flair got a couple punches in, and then Steamboat was able to whip Flair, and then Flair did his famous Flair flip onto the apron. So it started out really good, like you said, just heavy. They were going at it heavy. You were watching a main event heavyweight championship match. You knew it, from the get-go.
You knew you were going to see a very physical match, and that these guys were at the go. And at that point, they said that Steamboat just came back just because only to get a title shot to win this title. He was semi-retired at that point.
Yeah.
But, I mean, these guys are chopping each other like crazy. Back body drop on Flair. And then, another back body drop Steamboat gave him. These guys, more chopping on it. The sound was so deafening that when I was watching it, I had to lean back a little bit. And I didn't even have the volume on what I was using to watch that loud. And I was just like, dang. I had a buddy of mine watching with me, and he was like, that's just too loud. That's normal.
And that's a Chicago crowd for you though too.
Yeah.
That's Chicago. That's the crowd is. I mean, when you think pro wrestling and you think like venues, you obviously think about um, Madison Square Garden first usually, but when it comes to like crowds and everything else, I put Chicago right up there. So
For me, if you when I think about pro wrestling, the first thing I think of is not the TD Garden anymore. It's the old Boston Garden. There, it's nothing like Madison Square Garden or was because what it was with the TD Garden, they had it all the seats like every other arena, except it made you feel like you were literally on top of them. So like
hmm
that literal feeling where it was like you're literally leaning forward and you're literally looking right at them from the top of them, like
yeah,
on the top of the crown of their head. It's nothing else like it. And going to wrestling stuff as a kid, like that was nothing anything different. But you know, the old Boston Garden's not around. It hasn't been around for a long time. It's not the same. But Madison Square
hmm
Garden, and if you're an old '80s fan, if you were talking about it, the Boston Garden would be one of those
oh
two.
yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, if I got into the tape trading scene in the mid '90s, and one of the they would call them fan cams or like cam shows, and basically it's just there's no commentator. It's just a fan sneaking in a camcorder and recording the show. And usually, when it came to um, those shows, if you wanted to get them on tape, um, the pretty much the three places that you would find them, or there's four. You'd find Madison Square here and there. You'd find the Nassau Coliseum, Philadelphia, the Spectrum in Philadelphia, and then, like you said, Boston Garden. Those were the four that you'd usually always find. Um, you could find those fan cam shows, the recorded shows, and I used to have some of those tapes, and there was nothing really outstanding on them. It was just a way. It was just a show. It was a house show that you got to watch just without commentary. And so yeah, some of those Boston shows, I would love to say that I've been able to go like you have. That would be amazing. But I am lucky enough to say that I've seen some of those shows. So it's really cool.
Yeah, and I've seen that pre epilepsy. So it's not like, well, I've never gone to a wrestling show ever. I've seen those before, the epilepsy
Yeah.
started. So it's like, uh, a ticket at the old Garden for a house show was like $13. So we would literally be sitting up on top, and it's not where right now you sit on at the TD Garden where for example, hockey tickets. I had no problem going to a hockey game with my epilepsy because obviously I made all the precautions I needed to. And that's a completely different animal because in hockey there's not like pyro, strobe lights, and all that stuff. They have flashing lights, but it's very short periods where you have people coming in and out, and all that stuff's going off every what other match.
Yeah.
So in a house show on these, there's nothing on there. It's just bare boned. And in the old Garden, they would just come out and announce them, and they'd go at it, and you could just watch it. It was really nice. But we digress on this. Flair with a side headlock and a hammerlock. Ross is talking about their conditioning, which is amazing.
hmm
At that point, you wouldn't expect these guys to be that in that peak condition. Um, Steamboat with a drop kick back into a side headlock and holding Flair down. You know, Flair was using the tights a lot in this match too, which
Yeah.
is quintessential Flair, and went for a pin twice. Steamboat kicked out, and another more side headlocks. Ross is talking about it also, how Flair and Steamboat's background. It was interesting to hear about the dynamic of how close their lives as people are parallel to each other.
Oh yeah. That was something that was very interesting. Going back and listening to it for sure. That was something else that I didn't really even know.
Flair and Steamboat double chopping so loudly on there. Steamboat with the pin, and Flair rolls out of the ring. You know, they're both trash talking about it. They're also commentaries talking about Flair's lifestyle, which has been legendary, as we all know.
Yeah.
Um,
And what's funny about those chops, December of 2018, I went to a show in St. Paul, Minnesota here, and Colt Cabana was who's now in AEW. Um, he was wrestling, and like after a independent match or after their match, they'd usually go to their merch table and try to sell their shirts. And my I had a buddy that worked security for this show, and it was me, Colt, and uh, my friend Dave, and Colt was talking about Ric Flair, and he was talking about the chops, and he said Flair is obviously known for like the chop, which we know, but like Colt actually chopped my friend and said, "Imagine that, but Flair adding more to it." And he goes, and my friend was like, just like that sucks, that hurt, and he goes, "Yeah, if you think that sucks and that hurts, Ric Flair, he did it way worse than that." And I always found that fascinating, and being able to see my friend get chopped like that was really cool too.
that's something I would pay to see.
Yeah,
um, you know, they double chopping each other for a long. It's like literally two redwoods chopping each other down. It was so much fun to see.
yeah,
They did a test of strength at a certain point. Flair trash talking and the crowds being against Steamboat. Hip toss and Steamboat with a drop kick, and he rolls out again. Side headlock. Also, there's a lot of hold combinations going through at this point. Flair pulling Steamboat's hair and using his elbow by Flair. More chop combos. Steamboat's turning around and shoulder tackle. These are old moves that we would consider not high grade, high quality moves, because we see moves like the RKO. We see moves you know, like the stunner. We see all these, the rock bottom, all that stuff after years later. But it's great to see a set of combination move sets where it's not like, stunner, Luthez press, this, where it's just nitty gritty, old school mat style kind of thing. Like the whole combination, like I said, about the headlock, and then they go into chops, a drop kick, shoulder tackle, just bending up the momentum, not like where it's John Cena where you do the five knuckle shuffle and then just pose for a second and then hit it. These guys just did it, and that's great. It made you appreciate that a little more though.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Like and as of like time goes by, obviously these guys evolve. Like um, it just like that Flair Steamboat match, like the way they were moving back and forth, and then a couple of years later, you get matches like 2 years later, you get uh, an example like Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect at SummerSlam '91, and then it just time evolves. These guys get better. They start doing a lot more. Um, because and that's what's just great. This match was just hard hitting. You had like if you you wanted. I remember rooting for Steamboat. I know a lot of people like Flair had his fans obviously, but just watching this match, it was like on the edge of your seat type stuff. Like for me, and that's what's so good was like about these guys is how how tough they were against each other, like, and then it just got better and more like you. It felt like you were getting punched. Like when I was a kid, it was just like after Flair would attack, you were just kind of like hoping Steamboat can get his momentum back. Steamboat gets it, you start getting excited. That's one thing I definitely miss about pro wrestling. I wish I had kid aspect of it like I used to.
It felt like you're being pushed and pulled and pushed and pulled, and
Yeah,
it made you want to go in to invest into one, and then the other one's rallying around. It's not where it's like, okay, the baby face looks like an idiot, works from behind, and then all of a sudden 3 moves in, done.
yeah, for sure, and I completely agree with that.
It, it's kind of not fair to the talent that who can actually do these types of matches. Uh,
Oh, for sure.
I mean, Flair with an elbow, Steamboat with these double chops, you know, and then Flair does his flop over like usual towards the
Hmm.
outside. Ross is talking about the history of the NWA title. You you don't hear many commentators talk about the in-depth history of the about certain titles, and in this match they did, which was a very nice touch. It was like
And that's
it's almost like the cherry on the top on the ice cream kind of deal.
yeah, for sure, and that's one thing that I've always liked about Jim Ross is he likes to add stories. He got to do that in WWF a little bit, WWE, but he can do that a little bit more now with AEW. Talk about the history of things. Um, that's what's great about some of these commentators, and it's not just pro wrestling like with Jim Ross. I mean, you got sports like some of the play-by-play guys that will add stories and stuff, and I think that's so important to add into the history um, of professional wrestling when you're talking about big matches. Um, it's something that I think is missing, and from a point it will. I don't, and this isn't a shot at WWE, but I don't think we'll ever hear Michael Cole talk about. Um, just to give an example, the time that Booker T won his WCW championship, just something like that. Like they won't talk about history. That's one thing that AEW is doing well, and Jim Ross talking about history is good. It's really good. It makes people like us who like when we were younger might actually invest in time and go back and watch some of these matches. I love that, and I that was cool. Like hearing him talk about some of this stuff, and some of it going back and watching, I didn't know. Like I didn't, or I didn't remember. I like so it was good. It was cool to hear, and that's one thing that is so great about Jim Ross.
And if most of these commentary people now, like you said, Michael Cole, if they do, it's like really brief. Like if the Miz comes out, he talks about how Miz was a
Yeah,
main eventer and
and
stuff.
and that's and one thing I should get clear about is that's not on those guys. That's just the way that's what they're told. WWF WWE tells they're very they're in your ear type stuff. Like and that's just something for whatever reason WWE Vince does not want. And for whatever reason, that's up to them, but yeah, it's one of those things where you're right. If he does talk about history, it's very short, and that's it is what it is, I guess. But one day I hope that changes.
Yeah, Flair using the railing, just to keep up. He's rake the eyes. The chops are still painful. Um, it's really at this point extremely physical, and it's amazing. Flair with the elbow, knee to the side of Steamboat, and a snap near, and another knee goes down, and Flair goes for a pin attempt at two. In old school matches like this, especially when I was a kid, you never really saw a double arm suplex. You really didn't. And in this match, they used it, and it was a really nice spot on it.
Hmm.
But it's from Flair to do it, and Steamboat kicked out on the pin attempt. Right hand, straight right hand by Flair, and the crowd is completely behind him. And then another chop, and then another, you know, upside down, and Flair goes across with the crossbody. And that sequence was really nice because with Steamboat chopping him up, Flair goes down and flips out to the outside, runs up, and does the crossbody. You don't see like Flair as he got older to do that. You almost like see this and you're like, wow, you kind of took for granted what Flair could do at this point compared to his later runs with WWE and WCW.
And what's crazy too about Flair is he how long did he miss? Like 4 to 5, maybe 6 years
Yeah,
of like his prime because of a plane crash,
yeah,
and he came back and was doing stuff like this, and oh, yeah, you know, it's it's awesome. It was great, and that was one thing about Ric Flair, man. He put on a show, and it's I think we're lucky as hell to be able to say that we've been able to watch Ric Flair wrestle and get to see Ricky the Dragon wrestle like in some of these matches, um, and Ricky the Dragon, he was somebody I always loved. You know, going back, my first or my earliest memory is like a lot of people about with Ricky the Dragon was when he was WrestleMania. You know, with that outfit that he had, and
the Macho
um,
Man match. Yeah,
yeah, and blowing doing the fire, the blow like dragon, you know, just blowing that fire out, and just he was just awesome. And then the matches he had, just with Flair, like overall, we're lucky, man. We get to see these guys. We got to see these guys.
yeah. The combination of the inverted atomic drop into the figure four, that was a good spot, and
That
that
was
was
that was badass.
yeah, and that was very interesting. And I kind of wish some of these guys would pay attention to it and do something like that, where let's say because the Miz uses the figure four, right?
Yeah.
Why not he just does his like his re whatever it is, the net breaker into a back breaker or whatever combination, you know what I'm talking about,
Hmm.
into the figure four. That would be an interesting thing. You know, you see these guys do one set move, go to the next, turn around, get hit. And that's the nature of the business as it is right now. But you know, these combinations, the unique ones where it's like, you know, and a good person who you could compare to Flair to do this is AJ Styles because there's a lot of combination moves he does. He
Oh
goes
yeah.
from like, you know, that fireman's carry net breaker to, you know, the calf crusher kind of thing. And you appreciate that, but you don't see it in these newer talents. You don't see Cena doing the five knuckle shuffle into the STF, which Warren's already
Yeah.
stated on a match memory. It's the worst STF he's ever seen.
Yeah. What the yeah, and that's one thing that I do miss about things like that. The technical aspect. Um, the you still see it like the um the moves like the counters basically. You still see it, but it's not as good as it used to be. And like I mean, Bret Hart, he used to be able to counter all kinds of stuff that would just be awesome. You know, like turn something into the sharpshooter. Yeah, and I honestly, if I remember correctly, I think he even my memory might be bad, but I even think he did a figure like somebody had him in the figure four, and it might have been Ric Flair. And then he was able to reverse it into the sharpshooter, like after rolling over and stuff. So just things like that, just that the aspect of what you were saying, just it's it's not like it used to be for sure.
I love the fact that Flair is trying to make him submit, and the crowd is now behind Steamboat, and Flair is using every inch of those ropes that he's nearby for leverage. And
Hmm.
you don't see the refs allowing that to get away because they're positioned in a certain way and they're taught to be a position or a certain way. You
Yeah.
know, Ross is screaming at the top of his lungs that Flair wants to break Steamboat's leg. Um, you know, the momentum's still going towards Flair, and you know Steamboat in the figure four still is hitting the mat, and it made me think he was tapping out because usually that's a sign of a submission, but he was trying to get momentum back and he put the pressure back on Flair. Do you think that didn't you? The question now, and I have to rephrase this properly, is: did you think the same way I did that Steamboat tapped in the traditional sense as we know now when he was hitting the mat on the hitting the mat?
I I don't, and the reason I say that's because of just how fast it kind of happened. Um, I don't think he did, but but I but my opinion might be different because I was rooting for Steamboat, um and what's crazy is like I've seen this match numerous times over the years, and what's great about for me going back and watching matches is that you always kind of wonder like if something different's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like even though you know what's going to happen, it's just you get that sense of you still get that sense of urgency when you watch the classics. Like I mean, you just did the recent SummerSlam, and going back and what or like the recent like when the wrestling show you did with Sean, like you go back and you think about these shows that were so good, um
We'll
and when you
touch about that match, remember, because this kind of remind me of that match, but we'll talk about that at the end.
yeah, and that's what's so cool about these matches is like you go back and you when you watch it again, you kind of you know what's going to happen, but there's just that curious part of you that you just want to see. You just want to see something like you just want to see it again. Basically, is the easiest way to say it, and that's what's so damn good about this match is it was so good. You were on the edge of your seat. Granted, I was 7 years old, but I still get that feeling when I watch these two wrestle, and that is awesome. I've been using that word a lot, but there's a reason for it. So
Yeah, Flair's still putting pressure on it, holding the foot now. And the ref at this point caught him using the ropes for leverage. I mean, match at this point was still going back and forth. It was literally a chess match in its finest. Flair with a kick and working on the leg on Steamboat, and these chops are still deafening as it at this point. I think we're literally at the 15 to 18-minute mark on this match. We're at this point, and the pace is going to start picking up a little bit.
how
It,
many chops do you think that match had?
it
If you
probably had about 30 or 40, and if you counted the
Yeah,
double ones, probably more.
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I mean, they were doing it. Then that's why when you asked this goes a good point is that the chops and the punch combinations between both men over the top, and Flair lands on the crown of his head. You know, this is literally one crazy match. Um, and they keep hitting each other like this, and you see welts on both of
Hmm.
these guys' bodies.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the these chops are just insane. Flair throws Steamboat to the post. Vertical suplex by Flair, and then another pin attempt, and Steamboat kicks out before three. This is they do this combination of pin combination 3 times. Um, the side suplex by Flair, and it's not holding Steamboat down. You know, this is just like that whole combination where they're literally that vertical suplex and the 3 pin attempts by Flair was just so awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fantastic. Um, like you said, it started getting it started going faster and faster, and these it just like everything going on in this match, and the crowd's going nuts, like still, and it's just eh, exactly like you're just watching in with anticipation.
And the side suplex by Flair, and it's not holding Steamboat down. Backbreaker by Flair, and using his feet on the ropes and for another set of pins. And Steamboat kicks out on all of them. Inside cradle from Steamboat, and Flair kicks out. It's getting to the nitty gritty right here at this point, and Steamboat went for, a bit of, kind of like a bit of a move, and then a drop kick, missile drop, missed. So it was, I can't remember the name of the move they said, but it was just like multiple pins, reversals, suplexes by Steamboat. The pace is picking it up, and Flair with the foot on the ropes all the time. Flair with the slide pin and kicked out. They're doing like combination pins right now at this point, which is getting you really hyped to see what's going to happen next.
Hmm.
So were you happy with getting towards this point? Because there's literally probably another like 3 minutes in this match.
Yeah, it's just going heavy back and forth, and you're just you just depending on who you were rooting for, you're just like sitting on the edge of your seat. And I just remember when I was a youngster, just yelling for Steamboat, So, and yeah, I was nervous. So, and I thinking about it now, I'm like, I don't know why I was so nervous, but it's just they're going back and forth because I just did not like Ric Flair when I was a kid, And I mean,
He
he
is
did
the
his job,
dirtiest player of the game.
yeah, and yeah, and just going back now as an adult, and that's debatable, being an adult, but seeing Ric Flair now was just how much you appreciate him more and more, and Steamboat for that matter.
You appreciate Flair being what he is back then, and appreciated what he's done. For somebody who's in his 70s now, and you look back at all these matches and stuff, it's amazing. And
And
all
you know,
on top of that, all those commercials he's doing and all the deals he's got.
yeah. And what's funny about Ric Flair is I was always terrified when I would go to a WCW show that I would be that kid that he would say, "Shut up, fat boy," before I before I go to your mama's house to make a woman out of her. I was always terrified that I would be that kid. So like, and and I'm not kidding. I was terrified because I was that fat, and I'm still fat, but I was that fat kid, like just,
You're afraid of the big Papa Pump spot, like in you know,
yeah,
what was it, 99 Stampede that me and Sean did when he went in there and he said to the woman, he's like, "I'll make a man, show you a real man." That's
no,
Flair years
like,
earlier.
yeah, yeah. For me, it was. I was always terrified, like that he would, like, I was glad I was never in the front row for that. So, um, the shows that I was in the front row for, like that I've been able to go to, I never had to deal with that. I had Test at a WWE house show in the early 2000s. Basically told me to shut the f up, but other than that, that was about it.
At this point in this year, you it on the WWF side, WWE side, you had Hogan running amok and through there as the top tier, and having these two guys in this part of their lives, because this is after they did the manias for WWE. This is after everything else, and to make this important. But these guys at this point were the best. If you didn't have Warrior and stuff like that in the WWE side, WWF, then these guys would be literally going at it every night. Now, they would be doing what the WWE does with this match. It's kind of sad to say that, but it's true. But it's that good of a match. Um,
Yeah,
the clotheslines out of the quarter, then they basically going at it. The judo chop by Steamboat, the flying tackle. You don't see anybody doing a judo chop from the top rope anywhere, and it lands, you know, landing on his feet, another flying judo chop, crossbody, and the ref was down. We're getting towards the tail end of the match, but what do you think of the whole thing of the combination of the judo chop, the drop kick on Steamboat trying to get his momentum back before everything, and then the usual spot where the ref just gets obliterated and just gets
yeah,
taken out?
yeah, yeah. That crossbody that he did on Flair, and then where where he also hit the referee Tommy Young when he was hit and he was out. Yeah, it was like that's when the anticipation of the match even built up more. You're like, oh crap, they got to get this referee. Who's gonna who's gonna take advantage? Is this referee gonna be mad because Steamboat knocked him down, or knocked him out?
There's so many
Um,
factors at that point.
yeah, and then the Steamboat tries to wake him up, and Flair takes advantage. So it's just like crazy, just like like And what's making me smile about this is because it is bringing me back to early memories of just how damn good this match was. And that's the thing. Like I've always, when I first started wrestling or watching wrestling, I watched because I I was enamored with these real life superheroes. But over time, I started watching the other aspects of it, like
The
the
technical side,
moves.
it and
Yeah, and granted, I was, like I said, 7 years old, but I was noticing this stuff. So, and that was just a big year for me wrestling wise. I mean, if you go back, there were so many big matches that year.
mm-hmm.
Um, like, be about a what a month later, I think you had that was WrestleMania 5, so you had Hogan versus Savage, and maybe it was 2 months. But and then you also had later on they had the rematch at Wrestle War between Ric Flair and Steamboat, and then uh, and that's when Ric Flair got the belt back. So just so many big things happened that year,
it,
and
in general, that era was really good until you hit to the Attitude Era. Um, Flair doing going for a pin with a cradle and no ref.
yeah. And how long do you think they were in that cradle?
Probably for a good about 2 3 minutes. I mean, that would have been like an 8 or 9 pin if there was without the ref, but that would have been just the end of the match. Steamboat over the top, and he flies and misses Flair. Inside cradle for win, and Steamboat is the champion. Like I said, match was actually got the time again. After I looked at it again, it was about 24 25 minutes. But the look on Flair's face was just priceless. Like he
Oh
was
yeah,
just shocked.
he sold it. And what's cool about that, and maybe if somebody goes back and watches that referee that came in, that replacement ref, that was Teddy Long. So that, so, and that's what's funny about that show, where or to me is compared to now. I mean, I don't know how many referees the WWE uses and like in one taping, like for a Raw, but this pay per view they only used two referees during the whole event. So um, that was, and that's not really a big deal, but I just noticed that when I rewatch this. Like I said, I've seen this pay per view a lot. I've watched it's one of my go tos for the if I want to watch 80s wrestling, like this, and then some of the older WrestleManias.
For me, it was more so going towards the latter half of this year into the 90s where, you know, you had Bret Hart building up the popularity. He was IC champion, I believe, at this time. Um, as a kid, I was like every other kid was huge into Bret Hart because I thought it was like one of those things. He's like, at that point, that was before my parents divorced too. Um, I was literally probably about 4'9" and like a buck 10, and after the divorce started, I was literally 5'1" and almost 180. That that's how big of a pendulum swing that made it. But I at that point I thought, I could relate to Brett a lot more than I could relate to Hogan. Um, with the question as since we segued off of this, who do you think in each individual brand could go like in this match? If you had to pick two for each wrestlers for each brand for a 25-minute match to get this
for
much of effect.
for like right now
Yeah.
terms. In WWE, I would say, um, or I'll say which ones I'd really like to see. Um, would be AJ Styles and Adam Cole. I think they
Yeah.
could do it. Um, in AEW, um, Kenny Omega and oh, damn, there's so many guys in AEW that could do it too. But I want to kind of go off the radar a little bit. I actually think Kenny Omega and oh man,
I think Miro
this
could do it.
I do, but I just part of me just wouldn't. I know he could do it. It's one of those things where I don't think it would be as good, and that's not against Miro because I love Miro. Um, I would say maybe I would say, and it's not really off the beaten path, but I would say probably Moxley again. I think Moxley could go with anybody, but Omega and guys like hell, Eddie Edwards could do it too. I think there's just so many guys, and with Kenny Omega makes everybody look good, and I would, you know what, I will say this: I would like to see Cody Rhodes and Omega. That's
That
who I
would
would
be
say.
awesome. I
Again,
For me, it would probably be, and we'll probably end up getting this match anyways with the draft and everything, would be Lee and Roman. And it's just Lee's very physical, very technical sound. Roman's very physical, in your face, goes right at it. And then in the current status, you could put Roman in the Flair spot, and you could put Lee in,
the
the
only
Steamboat spot, though.
the only thing I would say about that is you just wouldn't see the amount of holds. Um, but yeah, I mean, it would still be a great match, and
For a technical match, it'd probably end up being what we already got. We got Balor and Cole. I mean, that
yeah,
was a very technical sound NXT Championship match, and it was for high stakes for the NXT title. So that would be that's the other one I was thinking in AEW. I could agree with you. It'd be Cody and Omega, but I would think Miro could actually push Omega a little bit further because Omega doesn't know his set yet.
and the other thing too is another match that I go back to AJ Styles, but um, I actually hope they build an AJ versus Sami Zayn Intercontinental match, because I think if they gave them the time, I think they could put on the match. They could put on a WWE match of the year type quality match. But that's saying a lot about everybody. If WWE gave these people time for matches, a lot of them could give us matches of the year. It's just it's one of those things where they just don't give the time because, and that goes back to everything. Like even like the house show reports going back to the revival versus Gable and Jordan. Like you hear about those house show matches that they used to have, and they were just outstanding. And that's the thing that these wrestlers don't get the opportunity to have much time. And that's what's so cool about that was so what was so great about last week's uh, Cole versus Balor match is they gave them time, and
They
that's
kicked it
something
off too. Yeah.
that's desperately needed. And I I wish we would. I wish that um, these guys would get more time in the matches, but there's so many people that they have to get to and go through, and the fact that we see so many matches that repeated doesn't help. Um, but yeah, like there's so many different ones that could do it, and that's not even getting into the like fantasy booking, like like getting into like Omega versus Styles or something like that.
That's another show for another time too.
Oh yeah, for sure. But yeah, no, like yeah, so many. Like I could go on for probably the rest of the day with different matches that could be um that I think could measure up in time like with one of these.
Yeah. For me, what it is that because of doing 99 Spring Stampede with Sean, check that out. It was really good doing a match memory with Sean Ross Sapp. It was really interesting, really fun. And that tweet he put out about wanting to interview Blitzkrieg, I really hope he does because that would be interesting. For seeing Flair in this match compared to that now, and looking at the match memory with him and the match memory with what we're doing now, you see two different versions of Flair and two different styles of performer. It really makes you, like you said, appreciate both of them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, hell yeah. Um and that's what's so great about the wrestling of yesteryear. You just have an appreciation for so many people, and that list could go on and on and on. But yeah, this match was like outstanding, and just thinking about that whole pay per view was great, in my opinion. I mean, you had some good tag matches, you had some of the biggest stars at the time in there, and Everybody loved the Road Warriors, especially when they were in Chicago. So
Yeah.
it just so much going on.
Well, Rob, tell them where they can find you, my friend.
Well, I do appreciate you having me on. Like always, it means a lot to me. If you'd like to follow me, you can at Rob Wilkins on Twitter. I'm also if you go to the Fightful Facebook group, I am one of the moderators on there. And then on Wednesday nights, when both AEW and NXT are going against each other, I'm either covering AEW or NXT with Kyler. So I do one or the other shows for the Fightful Wrestle account. But other than that, I'm pretty much always on Twitter, so you can reach me anytime.
Yeah. Also, you'll be, and I'm very proud of you for agreeing to this, and I'm very happy. The With the Anchor FM launch for the podcast, it will literally be Rob sitting in on the second seat for the roundtable. Now, these roundtables on the Anchor FM stuff, which you can find on Spotify and other podcast platforms, once a month we will be doing a roundtable with certain people. The first show is going to be with Wild Boy, and then Rob's going to sit in on the roundtable, and I'm hoping trying to get another person and make it a real roundtable instead of like a triangle right now. But and I'm hoping that we could get that done. Other than that, hit the like button, subscribe, tap for notifications. Any comment or positive feedback was great. Like I say on the regular show, support Fightful. They did a show Monday for the Monday Night Wars, which I still call it Monday Night Wars. I'm sorry, it's old school since we talked about old school wrestling. Just him, Sean and Denise every Monday. I think Warren, Louie, and Alex are tonight again. So the band's all back again, and then you have Listing Your Boy, which is we're recording this right before 2 o'clock at 2 o'clock, and it's ending right when Listing Your Boy is going on. So I do apologize about that, but they're on every Wednesday, and then Jeremy, who was the birthday boy yesterday when we were recording this, which is the 16th of September. Him and Sean do Friday, and then you got a busy week next week with the pay-per-view, and they just announced another one. So you can hit it up, the description below on all the information right there, including Rob's Twitter handle. Just be good, be kind, do a good deed, and pay it forward, guys. Another match memory in there, and we've got more to go.
All right, thanks, man.